The Zolotitsa, a journey to nowhere.
The 29-year-old Russian freighter, the Zolotitsa, was one of 3 battered cargo ships that scrambled to evacuate those fleeing Monrovia from the carnage of April 6, 1996. This was not a humanitarian gesture. For the crew, it was a gamble for profit. Those running from the war were throwing their dice in the hope that the ship would help them escape from the violence. Unfortunately, reality is rife with hard lessons. In the gamble called life, according to the American country legend Kenny Rogers, every hand's a winner and every hand's a loser. Of course, nobody ever plays to lose, as it was with the Zolotitsa. The Zolotitsa's quick calculations to net a quick gain of about 50,000 United States dollars ended in a tale of tragedy and irony. The ship's 3 weeks escapade concludes the mini-documentary Liberia's Boat People that attempts to recreate the experience of thousands of refugees who fled Liberia's April 6th war via the sea. As the Zolotitsa prepared to embark on its treacherous journey, it embodied the hopes of more than 400 desperate passengers yearning to escape the claws of trigger-happy teenage butchers running amok on the streets of Monrovia. With Liberia unraveling so fast, it seemed insane to keep sticking around. The Zolotitsa seemed like the last chance to leave, and those who tried to grab it were willing to pay anything to get out. They were not only Liberians, they came from all over West Africa. There were Ghanaians, Guineans, Gambians, Nigerians, and Sierra Leoneans.
As they settled on the deck of the Zolotitsa, they held on to solid metal, but they were like drowning people grasping at straw. The ship they hoped would save them was only taking them on a death ride that would end right here at the very place they were running away from. It was May 26, 1996 in Monrovia. A couple of weeks earlier, the Bulk Challenge and the Victory Reefer had taken off with thousands of refugees, giving hope to those left behind that it was possible to escape the war after all. However, as these 2 ships got swallowed up in a series of heart-stopping drama on the high seas, this fragile hope quickly faded into anguish. Fortunately, hope was revived on May 14, 1996, when, in what seemed like a coordinated action, the Bulk Challenge and the Victory Reefer were finally allowed to dock and discharge their passengers in Ghana and Sierra Leone. The Zolotitsa could not wait to capitalize on that positive turn of events. Therefore, on May 26, 1996, it took its chances and hit the waters. The Zolotitsa lunged forward into the Atlantic Ocean, ready to weather whatever it was that had troubled its predecessors. As the deep blue Atlantic embraced them deeper, hope quivered on their lips and joy bubbled in their hearts. No more would they have to tremble at the sound of guns. No more would they be deprived of their pride and dignity by drugged and uncompromising teens, doing the biddings of callous men hell-bent on subduing the nation to their will. Some of those fleeing had already been violated in ways they could not talk about. They looked at the sprawling sea and imagined the endless possibilities that lay beyond. This was their chance to find freedom and live a better life. Others had gone before them from the early days of the war. Many of them were now living in rich countries far away. They would soon join them too. Or so they thought. Some quietly vowed to themselves never to return. Some told themselves that the future would decide. For now, all they wanted was to get away as far as possible, anywhere as long as it was not Liberia. Meanwhile, the resolve of the neighboring countries to not receive additional refugees from Liberia had only solidified. They were ready to rebuff the ship swiftly and viciously. Following the crisis involving the Bulk Challenge and the Victory Reefer, they were now well-schooled in the art of dark diplomacy. These countries were now brandishing Taylor's propaganda as hard facts, that on board every ship leaving Monrovia, There were hardened rebel fighters eager to set the whole of West Africa ablaze with political tension. In addition to holding on to Taylor's lies for their own convenience, there was a second anti-immigrant theory making the rounds in the corridors of power in the sub-region. West African leaders had convinced themselves that by continuing to offer open arms to those escaping the war from Liberia, the conflict would never end. Liberians would keep fighting each other, knowing that they could run to other countries for asylum whenever the going got rough. Whether justified in their assumptions or not, scores of these leaders were ever willing to watch thousands of innocent women and children die on the seas instead of making the minimal sacrifice needed to relieve them of their pain. That morning on May 26, 1996, the Zolotitsa was eastbound, tracing the footsteps of the bulk challenge. San Pedro in the Ivory Coast was the first port of call after departing Liberian waters. The response from the Ivorian authorities was a firm no. The ship continued on to Ghana. On May 30th, it made its way to the port of Tema. There was no mercy for them there either. The Ghanaian Navy shot at them. The ship was now desperately low on food and water. The crew had no choice but to keep on a forward trajectory. Togo was only 78 nautical miles away, compared to the 611 miles back to Monrovia. It was obvious that the ship was now moving at a drastically reduced speed because it took 4 days to get to Lome, the same time it had traveled from Monrovia to Accra. Sadly, in Lome, Togo, the Zolotitsa and its occupants found no sympathy as well. The Togolese authorities only appeased their own conscience by providing the ship with some meager stocks of supplies. By this time, the passengers were not only dealing with emotional issues, they were also getting physically sick. From Togo, the Zolotitsa was now faced with the wild open sea and the option of just drifting on and on until someone received the refugees or lost everything trying. In its immediate sight were Benin and Nigeria. Based on available information, opinions vary as to whether the ship ever made it to those ports. Whether they did or did not was immaterial in the end. With its passengers dying and left with nowhere else to go, the ship was forced to do the unthinkable. It turned around and headed back to Monrovia, back into the fire it had desperately attempted to escape a few weeks before. When the Zolotitsa sauntered into the Freeport of Monrovia with the remnants of its passengers on June 18, 1996, there was tearful jubilation. It was ironic that they would be happy to return to the very place they had fled from just weeks before. However, for those who had survived the 3 weeks of horror on the open sea, there was nothing more precious than being alive with their feet on solid ground. It did not matter any longer whether this was the same place they had desperately sought to escape from. The Irish Times reported this emotional moment and reported that about 10 people died as the rusting freighter roamed the Atlantic Ocean off West Africa, short of water and rejected by ports in the region. This claim of casualty was denied by the Ukrainian captain of the ship. The ship was not only beset by rejections. On its way back to Monrovia, it encountered more serious problems. The Sierra Leone Times described the last leg of the ship's journey back to Monrovia as the watching world lost contact with it, fearing the worst. June 16th. Bad weather has forced the temporary suspension of an air search for the Russian cargo ship Zolotitsa, which is carrying 450 refugees from Liberia, including some Sierra Leoneans. An air search on Saturday between Abidjan and Accra by Médecins Sans Frontières failed to find the vessel. A spokesman for the group said searchers are now concentrating on the area west of Abidjan after one ship reported sighting the Zolotitsa and another picked up a message from the ship saying its engines had failed. Médecins Sans Frontières is checking reports that the vessel is stranded off Cape Palmas near the Liberia-Ivory Coast border. The ship was estimated to have run out of water on Saturday, although rains may help to replenish the water supply.